My name is Mike Carducci, and I'm going to talk about issues associated with male caregivers, how to have a successful doctor visit, and a lot of the mistakes that I've made, and having difficult conversations. First and foremost, who am I? Okay, so I was 7 years a caregiver for my father. Now, with an asterisk, I was the secondary caregiver for my father. My lovely wife over here was the primary caregiver for my father. I had that pesky day job thing where I had to go to work every day and come home. So she was primary, I was secondary, but I also was the caregiver's caregiver. So I helped her do things that she needed to do, give her the breaks that she needed. So the caregiver's caregiver plus a secondary caregiver for my father. I'm a certified caregiver advocate. Certified through caregiving.com. I am a member of the Professional Association of Caregivers. I have completed caregiver basic training at the Caregiver Training University. I am an Alive Inside music detective, basically a music therapist for those in music and memory programs. And I'm a retired 31 years federal government. And I got to tell you, I've stood in front of presidents, I stood in front of Armed Services Committee, Senate and the House, and I've never been as nervous as I am standing in front of my wife speaking. Just for the record. Usually you go to conferences and you get a statistics slide. I'll give you one. Approximately 43.5 million unpaid caregivers in the United States. 42% care for a parent. Of those 42%, 31 of those 42% are care for the mother, 11 for the father. Male caregivers, in 2015, approximately 40% of caregivers, and that counts paid and unpaid, and most of the male caregivers are paid caregivers. They're not necessarily the one in the house taking care of a family member. And that was a 100% increase over 15 years. And these statistics are from 2015. And I got these statistics from the National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP. And 65% of care recipients are female, around the age of 69, 70. And that 65% and the 31% kind of correlate to each other. So, again, the sources, National Alliance for Caregivers and AARP. Now, when you're talking about male caregivers, there's some perceptions, or misperceptions as I like to say. Over here, men are seen as opportunists, right? What's in it for me, huh? What can I get from my family? Can I get the family china? Can I get the family silver? Can I get this? Can I get that? And that's a perception that people have when you say, I'm a family caregiver and you're a male. The other one is, hey, I take care of my mom. And people look at you and go, yeah, right, your wife takes care of your mom, not you necessarily. So there's not that full realization of a male caregiver being a caregiver. It's kind of like, yeah, sure you are. So that's something that you kind of have to deal with a little bit if you're a male caregiver. Anybody ever read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? Yeah, no? Old book. And one of the premise of the book is we're very, very different. And while women are very empathetic, men are fixers. We fix things. Somebody comes to us and says, hey, I'm dealing with this and that and the other thing, we immediately start thinking about, how do you fix it? Well, because we're fixers, we don't necessarily feel comfortable asking for help. And one of those reasons we don't ask for the help is, if we have to ask for help, then we failed as a fixer. So we typically don't do that. And another thing is, men are typically, not always, but typically better at managing care as opposed to providing care. Meaning, our instinct is to go hire somebody to provide care for a family member. And about 40% of men use paid assistance. Another thing with men is we tend to minimize, right? Oh, you got hurt. Rub some dirt on it, Joey. It'll be okay, right? And I can tell you this from experience. I was passing by my dad's room one day, and my dad said, yeah, my shoulder hurts. And my dad did a lot of sleeping on and off during the day, and yeah, well, you probably slept on it wrong, and I went about my business. And my wife over here, she said, what was that about? I said, well, Dad said that his shoulder hurt. She said, his shoulder hurt where? Well, I don't know. I didn't ask. I'll talk about that later. And so she went upstairs, and he said not only did his shoulder hurt, but he felt pressure in his chest. Now, she had received training or accomplished training as a nurse's assistant previous to this. So she started listening to his chest and this and that and the other thing, and she couldn't find a heartbeat, even though she knew he was alive because he was talking to her. And, of course, dial 911, and they came. And my dad was having a heart attack. But in my mind, he's okay. He probably just slept on his arm wrong. So we tend to minimize a lot of times what is going on. And that's, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, but men, rub some dirt on it, you'll be okay. We have a tendency to wait until there is a crisis. I feel bad that I'm in your way. Wait until there is a crisis as opposed to taking measures to prevent a crisis. And that's something that we as male caregivers need to keep in mind and really need to be at the forefront. Dad's staying up all night, that's not a problem. Well, yes it is, because if he's up, what if he goes out the front door and goes wandering somewhere and something happens to him? He crosses the street in the dark, and just like a deer, you get hit by a car. Those type of things. It's just a little cough. It's nothing to worry about. But what if that's the beginning of pneumonia, and we all know that pneumonia is the biggest killer of seniors. So we got to make sure that we don't minimize the issues that come to our forefront. Now, let's talk about females, okay? And female maintenance. So, bathing your mom kind of gets a little weird, right? Bathing your adult child or your teen child, if that's who your caree is, that gets a little bit weird and uncomfortable. But bathing, putting on bras, and there's a comfort issue. How do you put it on correctly, that it's comfortable? Pantyhose, right? We went through a situation one time where there was 4 of us trying to help a family member put on a pair of pantyhose. Now, she was overweight, but there was 4 of us. So pantyhose, oh my God. I don't know how you guys do it, how females do it. Mani-pedis, toenails, fingernails grow. You got to be conscious of that. Changing adult diapers is a whole different level than changing your baby's diaper. It's a whole different plethora of issues there. Facial and other hair removal. But always bear in mind, while it's uncomfortable for you as the male caregiver, it's equally as uncomfortable to the female caree. So you want to take that one step farther. Is my mom, she has Alzheimer's, and she thinks of her little Mikey, her little cherub Mikey, as a 22-year-old, full head of hair, styled like Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever, right? Yeah, that was me. And she sees this, guy who's overweight and bald, and who's this guy that wants to get me naked? And so that creates a whole different level of stress for her, that there's some man here trying to get me out of my clothes. And it ends up in a panic situation where she's fight or flight. And that's not good for either. So there are things like that that we need to be aware of and work through. Now, moving on to doctor visits. Doctor visit requires successful, full and open two-way conversation between you and the doctor. And I really like this here. The doctor and the caregiver is a team. You have to have a team attitude, a team atmosphere. Now, is that something that's going to happen the moment you walk into a doctor's office for the first time? No, it's not. It's going to be something that builds over time. But also, team, T-E-A-M, is together each accomplishes more. So keep that in mind. Together you can accomplish more, and the caregiver and the doctor are part of a team. So some of the communications issues, men typically don't ask good questions. Again, from experience. I would take my dad to the doctors, and I would come home, and Bobby would say, "Well, did you ask the doctor about such and such?" "Yes, I did." "What did the doctor say?" He said, "Well, it's okay." "Well, did you ask him about this too?" I was like, "Oh, no." "Well, when he said this, you didn't think of that?" No. And I would get the stink eye. So we tend to not follow on questions. Even my personal doctor, I go for a doctor's visit. The doctor says something, I nod my head, and I move on, right? Doctor prescribes a new medication, I nod my head, and I move on. And then I get questioned at home, and I feel like the 5-year-old that's getting scolded. But because we don't ask those follow-on questions, typically. Not always, but typically. Medical personnel often are reluctant to share information about or with men, especially if it's about a woman. And if you're a younger male, it's even more difficult to have that two-way dialogue. Because you're a guy, what would you know about a female and their issues? Oh, and if you're a younger guy, you know even less about the issues. But you must try to foster a team attitude with the doctor if you're going to care for somebody. So, one of the things to have a successful doctor visit is make a list of your concerns and put the most important concerns at the very top of the list and work your way down to the least important. Most important, least important. And make sure, it'll help you make sure that all the things you need to ask the doctor or talk to the doctor about get addressed. Again, what did the doctor say about this? "Oh, I forgot to ask." And her response would be, "Oh." So, so those type of things do happen. It's best if you just make a list and just swallow the pride that you can't remember everything so you can make sure. Because the doctors have that 40-pound brain. And for me, I have like a 1.5-pound brain to hold information in. And so they start talking fast with big words. And I lose track of everything here. But if I have this to remind me, then I can get back to making sure that I address what I need to address with the doctor. One thing to always bear in mind is the doctor's time is limited. You have one patient, or maybe you have two patients, a mom and a dad, but the doctor has 40 more coming after that visit that you're having. And so their time is very, very limited. And so they need to address what they need to address and move on because they're on a schedule. We went, my wife spoke at the International Conference on Dementia and Dementia Care in Toronto back in April. And we had dinner with a doctor/researcher, and he says, "I hate caregivers. As a doctor, I hate caregivers because you take up so much time. However, if I'm the person that needs care, I want you as my advocate because you are going to make sure that I'm taken care of." So the doctors admit that caregiver is important, but if you're wasting their time, they really get frustrated with it. So always remember, have your concerns, deal with what you need to deal with, and let the doctor move on. And that will help foster that team environment. If you have built a relationship with the doctor or a physician's assistant, which she built a relationship with a physician's assistant, then you can email or call a day in advance, and a physician's assistant can kind of act as an intermediary where they can deal with the guy with the 40-pound brain, but also work with you to kind of bring the big words down to your capacity. So one of the things was it wasn't easy with my dad. My dad was a 100% disabled veteran, and so we were dealing with the Veterans Administration. And I know people go, oh, no. But the real problem with the Veterans Administration was my dad never saw the same doctor all the time. It was the next up. So having that physician's assistant as part of her team was really, really important because he could get to whoever was going to be his doctor on any given visit. So, oops, I guess I'm ahead of myself. No, I'm okay. So, again, make sure your key concerns are known at the onset, and this prevents the doctor from jumping to a conclusion. And this might be your main concern, but you stated all these other things. He concludes over here that this is the path to go, and he doesn't even know this exists. So he will dismiss what this is over here because you stated 4 or 5 other things here. So always make sure that the most important is what's first so that you don't get dismissed. And again, having a team, which she had with the physician's assistant, was very, very instrumental in successful doctor visits with my dad. Another key thing is listen. It's easy to get rattled, especially if the doctor starts using big words and starts talking about these pills with their technical names as opposed to what you understand. What you need to do is take a deep breath, focus on what the doctor is saying, and ask questions. Again, guys have a hard time asking questions. We need to just step back, ask questions. Bring a tape recorder or your cell phone and tape the conversation, but always ask the doctor if it's okay to do that first. Some might say no. I can't imagine it, but that'll help you go back because your head gets filled over 15 minutes of stuff and you forget things. This way you can always refer back. You can refer back the next day, the day after. So, but again, always ask if it's okay to tape them and then go ahead and do it. When you're building that relationship and you're asking the questions, don't be adversarial. You want to talk about going downhill fast, you become adversarial, you're never going to build a relationship. Play to the doctor's ego. Hey, doctor, you went through years and years and years of medical school, and you have so many years of experience in the medical field. I don't have that. Would you help me understand? Please take the time and help me understand. And by doing that, as opposed to being argumentative, they will in turn, typically, not always, some of them don't have a good bedside manner, but typically they will take their time and try to explain things in a manner in which brings it down to my 1.5-pound brain as opposed to their 40-pound brain. Another thing is, if new drugs are prescribed, have a list of medications that your caree takes and pull it out and say, Doc, how will this react with other medications? Because if the doctor, because of HIPAA laws, can only see what he's dealing with as a neurologist and can't see heart medications or something else, then he doesn't know, and he or she might prescribe something that would be counterproductive with one of the other drugs. So always have the medications list available so you can ask those questions about new medications and how they will react and interact with other drugs. I wish I knew all this when I was going to the doctor with my father, but I learned by error, not trial and error, but just error. We talked about, guys, minimize. We don't want to minimize the issues or symptoms or situations. The opposite of that is true. Don't maximize it. We always joke that my mother, who passed away first, which is why we took my dad in, we always joked that my mother lived by exclamation points. If she bumped her head, oh my God, I have a lump as big as a grapefruit. You ever see anybody with a lump as big as a grapefruit? Or she'd get a paper cut. I darn near cut my finger off on this piece of paper. Really, Mom? So don't maximize, but don't minimize either. Don't do the, oh, he says his shoulder hurts. It's probably just sleeping wrong. Another thing is, if you're aware of assets that are available in your community, let the doctor know. She is a support group facilitator, and where she does the support group is at a local senior center, and there's a adult daycare center associated with it, and the adult daycare center provides free of charge the care for your caree while they are attending the support group. That's a handy bit of information, because a lot of times if you're a caregiver, you can't go to something like a support group because you have nobody to take care of your caree. In this case, you can take the caree and you can get the benefit of that plus the support group. And that's a handy bit of information for a doctor to know, because there could be somebody else coming in saying, you really need to see about getting into a support group. Well, I have nobody to take care of. You know what? If you go here, they can do that. Oh. So you know the caree, you know what you have as far as assets for yourself. The doctor knows the medical side of it. It's easy for them to send people in that direction also. So don't be afraid to share, because they can in turn share. All right, let's talk about the tough conversations. And we're going to talk about legal issues, medical issues, those things that nobody wants to talk about. And you feel really creepy about talking about things like wills, estate planning, powers of attorney, end of life discussions, medical directives. But these are discussions that are in your best interest to have sooner rather than later. If you have them sooner, when everybody is lucid, then when the time comes later, you don't have to worry about, you know the path forward. So some of the legal issues would be estate planning. Is there an estate plan? Can you even get an estate plan? Is there an estate to have planned? In the case of my grandmother, and my dad was kind of her caregiver, she lived in an apartment, she had a small bank account, and her income was Social Security, and she had enough money set aside for her funeral. So there wasn't a whole lot there to be concerned with, but when you're dealing with houses and cars and tangible physical items, it becomes a lot more complex. A power of attorney. Now, having a power of attorney, it should identify who does what, when, and how, and any limitations on that power of attorney. Now, I was fortunate. My mom died first, so my dad came with us. And on day 2 of living with us, my dad was very adamant about going and getting a power of attorney, because even though we came from a small town in Pennsylvania, and he used to take my mom's Social Security check and deposit it for her and do all that stuff for her, because he wasn't on the account and he didn't have a power of attorney. When she passed away, the money that was sitting there for her funeral, they actually couldn't touch until it went through a probate. And again, it was easy because there wasn't a whole lot there. So it only took about 3 months, only 3 months, that my parents had to pay, but then they got the money in reimbursed. So my dad was very adamant, we need to get a power of attorney. So when we did that, we not only did a financial power of attorney, but we also did an advanced medical directive. So, and my dad said, I don't want to be hooked up to machines. I don't want them to cut me open to save my life. If it's time, let me go. essentially a do not resuscitate. I don't want the paddles and the electric shocks and all that kind of stuff. Let me go. So that was all part of that discussion. And again, it was initiated by him. So in our case, it was easy. He knew what he went through with his mother. He didn't want us to go through that also. So we got the powers of attorney and the advanced medical directives, the do not resuscitate orders. Also, insurance, life insurance. It's always a good idea to sit down with your caree, whether it be a parent, a brother, sister, whatever, and the insurance agent, and really figure out what is what so that you have an idea of what you're dealing with from a financial perspective at that end of life time. Again, it's a difficult conversation to have, but it makes life so much easier at the back end. I know it did for us. Also, when you're talking about insurance, I have one brother, and so it's my brother and I. And my mom was an insurance junkie, and she started insurance back in the early 60s. And it was a $500 insurance policy. And at the time, the beneficiary was my grandfather. And then there was another $500 policy, and then it went to a $1,000 policy, and then $2,500 policies. So there was 23 different insurance policies that my mother had on her and my dad for various amounts. And as I got older, so you jump forward to the 70s, then me and my brother were the beneficiary, 50 and 50, right? And so you go on, you think, okay, everything's cool. Well, when she passed away, both of us had to sign the beneficiary form before money would be distributed. Well, my brother isn't the most reliable person when it comes to getting things done. And so it was, Dan, did you sign the beneficiary form? Yeah. I was thinking about that. I'll get it done. 3 months later, yeah, I'll get it done. In the meantime, the life insurance company can't distribute the funds. So I actually had to drive from our house in Virginia to Pittsburgh and say, sign it right here, right now. Signed it. I took it to the insurance place, and 2 days later, I had the money. So with my dad, having had that nightmare with my dad, I said, okay, Dad, here's what we're going to do. There's all these insurance policies that say Dan 50%, Mike 50%. Here's what it's going to take for your end of life, for your burial and whatnot. All these others, we're going to divide it evenly. Dan gets this much here, Mike gets this much here. Sole beneficiary. So if he doesn't sign the forms, he don't get squat. It doesn't hold me up. And so we did that, and it made things so much easier for me. But again, it comes down to having that conversation, but also looking at what the finances are, understanding what the finances are, and moving forth with a plan. If it all gets confusing, there's no harm in going to an elder care attorney to look at some of these things and put these things in place for you. This is not the easiest stuff to understand. And if it's confusing, it's definitely in your best interest to take your caree, if your caree is lucid, to an elder care so that the decisions can be made, the papers can be drawn up, and it makes life so much easier for the living at the back end. By the way, if you have any questions, I'm here for you. It'll hurt my feelings if you don't ask me a question, you go away with a question in your mind. It won't hurt my feelings if you do ask me a question. So please, don't be afraid. Did you read? Oh. Again, the money. A lot of times men are a lot better at this than women. Women are a lot better at the empathy, the child rearing, and the caregiving. But some of the things that take into consideration is understanding the caree's finances, and is there enough money? And then is there enough money, and for how long? That's also a key consideration. Is there long-term care policies in place? Now, having had the benefit of watching my dad with my grandmother and doing my mother when it came time for my father, and now for us, I had learned a number of lessons the hard way along the way. We both have a long-term care policy. And in that long-term care policy there's a provision for reimbursement for the caregiver if it's a family member. So just to use an easy number, if it's $10,000 a month for a care facility, the policy says they'll pay 80% of that to a family caregiver. So that would be $8,000. Now, the $10,000 is just an easy number I pulled out, but the 80% is a real number. 80% of what they would pay to a care facility would go to if she has to take care of me or if I had to take care of her. So that helps with the finances. And you can set up parameters. Is it 1 year? Is it 3 years? Is it in perpetuity for however long it takes? And of course, if it's 1 year, it's less expensive. The policy, 3 years, a lot more, a whole lot more expensive. And in perpetuity, it's even more expensive. But those are decisions that you have to make and look at. But it's always worthwhile to look into. And make sure that there's a provision in there for the long-term care for the home caregiver. Because more and more, it's going to fall on us, the family members. Because the care facilities are just, there's so many people going in with the baby boomers aging. Those horrible, horrible baby boomers. Also going back to a power of attorney, it should address who handles what with regards to money. If a power of attorney is done after a diagnosis and your caree is rendered incapable and you are assigned by the state, there's a whole lot of record keeping that you got to do and a whole lot of reporting that you have to do. So it makes your caregiving experience a whole lot more cumbersome and a whole lot more stressful, because we all know caregiving isn't stressful enough. So again, if you can have these conversations and these decisions prior to, early as possible, it is always, always, always in the best interest. I guess I went quicker than I thought. Questions, comments, crude remarks?
Did any?
I think you got to hold that down for a second or so.
If the light is green, it's on.
There we go.
I think it's absolutely what you mentioned about having the conversations with parents about insurance, money, trust, will, all that. Get it out of the way early. Because once they get much older, it gets more difficult to reason with them.
You're exactly right. That's exactly correct.
So I was so blessed that I could have those
Sure. Yes, it is. And that's a very, very real situation, a very, very real question. I would suggest that in a moment where your dad would be talking about it, even showing frustration, that you could kind of ease that way. Hey, you know what, Dad? I understand what you're going through right now, but what would your wishes be if it came to you? And so you empathize with what is going on with him at that moment, and then you say, you know, I don't know what you would want in that case. What is it that you would want? Just so I know moving forward. As opposed to, hey, Dad, here's a beer. Let's talk about you dying. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sure. But I would caution not to surprise. No, don't surprise, but yes, always. If yeah. Yeah. You know, it's things like taking the keys away, right? That's always the real big nut to crack. And one of the things that we've come across is somebody said, you know what? Let's go to the DMV and show everybody that you're capable of driving. And let the DMV be the bad guys and take their license away. And then you can say, them SOBs at the DMV. I can't believe they did that. And now DMV's the bad guy, but you were the good guy. As opposed to having them hate you. Mm-hmm. Right. Let's prove it. Let's prove to them. And they're the bad guy, not you. Deflection. The deflection is always good. Okay, well then I'll do this.
Do I need to hold it?
No.
I think there's another interesting issue at the other end of the telescope. So, you know, my wife and I have put in wills and trusts and powers of attorney for ourselves, nominating my 43-year-old son to be an executor of our will and an attorney, and getting him to engage with that is so hard. Getting him, he's married, getting him and his wife to write wills for themselves, encouraging that, is difficult. And it's never easy whichever way you look, I don't think, is it?
No, it's not. And again, that's the difficult conversation to have. Nobody wants to admit to their mortality. I'm going to live forever. In my mind, I'm not 61. I'm 34. You know, I can still do all that stuff. It takes me, I don't bounce as high as I used to or as well as I used to, but I really don't think of myself as a 61-year-old. And nobody does, unless you're really decrepit. I know my mom, when she was 40, she acted like she was 80. But there are those people. But it's never an easy conversation to have. Anybody else?
I guess it's a comment / question, and that is, I have two parents, or a mother and a stepdad, and one is, you can guess which is which. One is an exaggerator, and like you say, you know, a paper cut is like, oh, I almost sliced my finger off, and the other one is a minimizer to the point where he can fall and have had a really severe bruise and won't even say anything about it. So I'm curious, when you've got both extremes, you know, I need to underreact whenever I talk to my mom about health issues, and I need to really not overreact, but get more involved when I'm talking to my stepdad.
So I actually had the same type of situation with my mom and dad. My dad, for a long time, had a broken rib, and he denied pain in a broken rib. And finally, it was discovered that he had this pain over here, and they did some x-rays, and he had had a broken rib for a while. And my dad was an incredible guy. He was like Superman minus the cape. And she said to him one time, she said, you got that mole on your shoulder. I think we should get it checked out. And we'll go to the doctors. I'll make an appointment for the doctors. And so the day of the doctor visit, she went upstairs. He said to her, we don't have to go to the doctor. I took care of it. And she says, what do you mean you took care of it? And what he had done was he took the razor and he shaved the mole off. And she says, oh my God, you can get infected. He says, oh no, that's okay. I put shaving lotion on it. What? So you talk about somebody who is impervious to pain, those type of things. And so she did take him to the doctor, and she says, no, we got to go and make sure. And the doctor said, yeah, he got it. He got it all. But could you imagine putting aftershave on something like that? That just gives me the willies just thinking about it. But my dad, a minimizer. Oh, no, it's okay. And my mom, oh my God, the sky is falling all around, everywhere you go. Anybody else? Oh, you put your hand down real quick, didn't you? Did he sign the paperwork? Eventually, yes. When it came down to, I got a stake in this, I'm going to get money, which I don't know why he didn't understand that when I said you're going to get money. But when I sent the forms for my father, I said, when you send these in, you're going to get money, and this is how much it is. And so it was solely his, and so there was something in it for him, as opposed to something in it for him and I. Then, yeah, he did. But, yeah, that's my brother. I love him. He's my brother. But he's certainly not my BFF.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on the minimizer thing. How do you get them to go to the doctor without kind of ostracizing yourself, making yourself the bad guy? I mean, if they don't want to believe that there's a problem, how do you even go about doing that?
With my dad, it was easy. My dad had been going to doctors basically all his life. He was diagnosed very early in life as a paranoid schizophrenic. So not only did we have the dementia issues, we also had heart issues. We had dysphagia, which is swallowing. We had Parkinson's, and we had COPD. So there was this whole layer upon layer upon layer that this angel over here dealt with 24/7. Well, maybe 23/7, because I had a little slice of the pie. So he understood going to the doctor. And when you told him tomorrow there's a doctor's appointment, he was like, okay. And he was up ready to go 2 hours before, pacing, ready to go to the doctor. Is it time to go? Is it time to go? Is it time to go? So I didn't have that issue. So I don't have any personal experience of trying to get my father to a doctor when he didn't want.
I'm only going to say this because I know I'm a difficult person to get to the doctor, and I was for a long time growing up. You only went to the doctor if you were dying, basically. And even then, we would go to one of those quick-minute clinic type of situations. For me, what got me going more regularly is now I'm on a medication that requires a doctor visit if I'm going to get a refill. So, right. So I would almost say you could little white lie and say if you need such and such refill or if you need such and such whatever, you need to go see the doctor so the doctor knows they're still giving you the right amount or the right whatever or the right medications, because that honestly was the only reason I go regularly. Now I go every 3 or 4 months, because if I don't go, then I don't get the medication that I need. So that forced me to go, and so now I get regular checkups on my heart, my blood pressure, and all that stuff.
Thank you for that. That's very good insight. And again, if you have that relationship with the doctor, you can have the doctor work with you for that.
Well, I was pretty much going to suggest what he said. And the other thing is make the doctor the bad guy. And you can tell him, if I don't take you to the doctor, I'm in trouble. And maybe you can get him that way. We always want to be on their side and make anybody else the bad guy that you possibly can.
Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Thank you so much. One of my biggest fears was that I was going to be in here by myself with her. Not that she's a bad person to be with, but I'm with her all the time. 3 years. 3 years. On the app, if you've downloaded the app, please rate the session. It helps Denise, but it also helps me. Her feedback to me. And I thank you all for coming, and I wish you all well. Take care. God bless.